Hello guys, it's Tim from the Shop Floor. Hope you're all well. Thank you for bearing with us whilst we take a little break. It was much needed. We have a favour to ask. If you do listen to our show and haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? It really does help the podcast reach new listeners. Thank you so much. Listen, Jasmine and I loved being guests on Edited's Inside Retail podcast so much, and they've kindly allowed us to share that interview in full with our lovely Shop Floor listeners. Inside Retail uncovers the opportunities and challenges that the retail industry is facing with the sector's leaders and innovators. In this interview, Edited's Grace Hill sat down with us to discuss the shocking reality of the relationships between head office and store staff. If, like us, you are mildly obsessed with the world of retail, Inside Retail's podcast is well worth a listen. You can find the link to their show in the episode notes. Speak soon, guys. Enjoy.
Those of us working in a retail head office are always trying to find new and innovative ways to connect to the customer, to get into the psyche of what they really want. However, so many brands already have a direct line to the customer that's in existence and goes underutilized every single day. So why is it that more head offices aren't using the abundance of knowledge and expertise at their fingertips from those interacting with them day in, day out on the shop floor? Welcome to Inside Retail, the podcast brought to you by Edited, the world's leading AI-powered retail intelligence platform. In this podcast, we delve into the current retail landscape, uncovering the opportunities and challenges it's facing with me, Grace Hill. This week, I'm speaking to two people who are amplifying the voices of the ever underappreciated retail store workers. Timothy and Jasmine are retail veterans and co-hosts of the chart-topping The Shop Floor podcast, where they lift the lid on what it's really like to work on the shop floor. In this episode, we talk about the shocking reality of the relationship between head offices and store staff, how retailers can create stronger connections with their customer experts to better understand not what makes them money, but who makes them money, the Instagram versus reality of their customer base, and the strategies that actually work in getting consumers back into brick and mortar stores. Timothy, Jasmine, welcome to Inside Retail. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thanks, Grace, for having us. I said a little second ago, like I'm losing my virginity on someone else's podcast. We're on someone else's, Tim. How are we going to do this?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. First time that we've appeared on someone else's podcast, so we're excited. Thanks, Grace.
No, well, we are thrilled to have you. As I mentioned earlier, the office at Edited has become obsessed with the shop floor, so my colleague Sam would be very upset if I didn't mention him. So yes, no, we're thrilled to bring your insights and expertise to our audiences. So I guess before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves, how you met, and how the shop floor came to be?
Take the floor, Timothy.
Sure. So about myself, I've worked in retail for 25 years, since I was 16. Kind of starting on the high street and then moving into luxury and then moving behind the scenes in retail, kind of head office roles, creative roles within retail. So it really has been my life and something that I'm incredibly passionate about. Jasmine and I met on the shop floor working in retail. So we were both studying. I was studying as a mature student. I'm nearly 20 years older than Jasmine. And we just hit it off instantly. It's one of those weird moments. We both recognized that we had amazing chemistry and we loved hanging out with each other. And just the stories that we kind of, the experiences that we were having on the shop floor, we were like, wouldn't this be hilarious to talk about this in a podcast? And that's how it came about, from a conversation on the shop floor to kind of some strategizing. And then we were like, let's just record something and see what happens.
I mean, it's genius content. I feel like there's so many people out there who relate to your experiences. I certainly was laughing my head off when you were talking about certain experiences, and very much imagine past colleagues in the same scenarios. So I'm curious, are you both in retail now, or have you moved on to different things?
I'm not in retail anymore. So I was working part-time in retail. I worked part-time, then I did full-time, like Tim said, while I was at university, and then went to full-time when I graduated for probably just under a year. And then I started interning because I went to art school. So I started interning in an agency that does photography. And so now I'm there full-time, which is obviously such a weird paradigm shift from like being in this super front-facing, like every day interaction role, and now I'm in a role that's a little bit more, probably I guess more corporate in some ways, but also got the creative element. But I do think that retail's really prepped me for that. I'm able to speak to anyone. So like I'm able to speak to strangers just from having been in retail, and I probably would not have the job I have now if I didn't have those skills.
Do you miss it?
I miss the people mostly. I miss the people. I miss chatting every day, the laughter. There's a lightheartedness and there's sort of like a camaraderie that is quite hard to find in other workplaces. It's the same that when I've worked hospitality, it's a similar kind of energy that I do miss. Do I miss people treating me like crap? Probably not, but like it's all part of it. It's all part of the fun of the day. And like, you don't know who's going to walk through that door. Like it is kind of, you don't know who you're going to get.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. I am still in retail. I graduated at the same time as Jasmine 2 years ago. I studied politics with a view to moving into politics. But I always fall back into retail, and at times I kind of beat myself up about it. But actually, fundamentally, I really enjoy it. I enjoy the kind of immediacy of retail. You know, in other roles, you're working on a project. It's very difficult to kind of look ahead and see something come to fruition. In retail, it's so immediate, you know, that customer interaction or something to do in the shop, and it's done. You leave at the end of the day with a sense of satisfaction. And I just, like Jasmine said, I love working with customers. I really enjoy that interaction, and with colleagues, it's super fun.
No, I have to say, it kind of bringing together in that shared experiences and that feeling of, you know, teamwork. You know, you're right, Jasmine, it doesn't quite feel the same in a corporate head office. But what I love about your podcast, which is doing extremely well, I think you guys are chart topping at the moment. Is that right?
It is right.
I know,
bizarrely.
by some miracle.
Yes. No, that's super exciting. Super exciting. But you obviously speak very much from the point of view of those working in retail stores. And at Edited, we spend most of our time working and speaking with those who work at head office. And I felt compelled to bring your insights and expertise to our audience. And ultimately, your experiences and insights are super powerful. And we are super passionate about customer centricity and having that at the forefront of better decision making. So I feel like it is important to share those experiences and how our teams could be working better. So the catalyst to this recording was your episode, I'm from Head Office, which was refreshingly honest and insightful. I loved the point about those that you worked with going off for fancy meals or cancelling Christmas parties, and then you seeing on socials that actually, in fact, those parties had happened, but those store teams didn't have the luxury or the opportunity to partake. But ultimately, you are an untapped goldmine of insights. So, Timothy, could you share a little bit more about that kind of strong sense of understanding the customer? I know that you shared an anecdote on the podcast, which was you were unpacking a new season and you knew exactly what was going to sell and what wasn't going to sell. So could you tell us a little bit more about that intuition and your experiences there?
Yeah, I think obviously the podcast is called The Shop Floor. It's about retail. And I think fundamentally the the team that works on the shop floor are the engine room of the business. You know, I think during COVID, we very much thought that there would be a heavy tip towards online shopping, and there certainly was. But coming out of COVID, Jasmine and I certainly found, and the company we've worked for found, that there was a huge desire for people to get back into shops. But so often, you know, the people that work on the shop floor, their experience, their product knowledge, their understanding, their deep understanding of what the client needs, so often that information isn't mined by people at head office, and it is so incredibly valuable. And I think it's a throwaway kind of, we're interested in what you think. We're interested in what you think of the collection.
Let's humor them.
Yeah, what's working, what's not. But I think there's a lot of egos. You know, I'm not saying that people on the shop floor don't have egos too. We all do. But I think so often in retail and the chain of command, there's breakdowns because, you know, either the buying team thinks they know better, the merchandising team think they know better, or they're just not communicating. I think a really good example is with faulty products. Often companies I've worked for, the faulty product, you'll write a quick report, email it off, and then the faulty product goes to a warehouse, when really it should be going to the design team or the buying team to actually, you know, look at the product, see what's going on. And so often with faulty products, we know before anybody else in the company that there's a pattern emerging. Like, okay, we've had 3, 4, 5 pieces coming back. How can we communicate this effectively so actually this valuable information is getting to the correct people? And I've seen time and time again across high street and luxury brands that actually there's a supposed willingness to hear what we have to say, but there's a breakdown in communication and things don't get fixed and remedied quick enough.
I think it's fascinating when you say about the egos and the buying teams and the merchandising teams, you know, thinking that they maybe know best. But actually, you know, listening to you both, you are day in, day out interacting with those customers and seeing it firsthand, which sadly buying and merchandising teams don't do. You know, they're reading numbers on a spreadsheet or within their BI system, but they don't truly understand who that customer is necessarily. So Jasmine, obviously, given your experience, what advice would you give to head office teams to maybe better understand and utilize the insights from the team that is on the front line?
I think to what Sim said, there's these huge egos, and it comes from, I think, like a societal, it actually comes from like society, I think, in terms of like people in service jobs are not as valued, I think, in society. And that's where this hierarchy of skills comes in, because I think often people's entry level role to retail might be on the shop floor. And therefore, when they see entry level, they assume that it's a lower skilled job. Whereas actually, like people like Tim and myself are just as valuable to them as the spreadsheets, if not more, because we're hearing firsthand what these issues are. You know, like the faults is a really good one, is, you know, you could have a design team and all their 3D mock-ups and scans and designs of the product look great. But if actually it's being manufactured and breaking every time, you can't fix that through a computer screen. You can only fix that by having hands-on interaction and understanding. I mean, we had countless things like the straps aren't long enough, because all these people are working so conceptually and design wise that they're actually missing part of the functionality of what products should be and why people buy them. It's so different if you're designing something to make money versus if you're buying something with your own money. Like the level of scrutiny customers will come in with, it's their money, especially in the cost of living crisis. You're not just spending money willy-nilly, you're really like interrogating products now. Like I think we saw the shift in that, Tim, for sure, as people really making sure that they're getting quality out of what they're buying. And I think like that's what's really the design teams and the head office should really take into account, is you need to test the hell out of these products before you're making people pull precious pounds out of their pocket to buy. I think that's really important. And also coming in, and when you come in, it's absorbing the information from us. We're literally like spies. We're like retail spies for them. Yes. And like for most of these companies whose main business is to make profit and to like grow the business further, is you want that direct feedback. You need it because your business won't grow without it.
I absolutely agree. I think that is the key point that I would strongly advise companies on, is this recentering of the customer experience, the customer's opinion. You know, companies are so big now on CRM, client data, and within all of that, huge expenditure at head offices on analysts, strategists. I think so often the actual voice of the customer is lost. And it's about that, what people on the shop floor are able to do is, you know, they're building community, building relationships with the clients where they will speak honestly, openly about their experiences, their viewpoints on the product, you know, their viewpoints on the kind of creative things that the company are doing. You don't get that kind of insight through looking at, you know, data. You just don't. You will only get it by speaking to people on the shop floor.
Interestingly, have you ever worked for retail brands where head office is, you know, they have to spend time in stores? Because I know that there are a couple of businesses that do that, but I'm just curious if you came across that.
I certainly have. I know that office footwear's changed hands many times, but when I was there, they would have directors come and work on the shop floor. I know that to some people listening might think that it was just kind of, they didn't really take it seriously. But I think, you know, from what I observed, they really were interested in how the store ran operationally. You know, how can we speed up this queue at the till? You know, how can we make your life easier with deliveries? Is this a good delivery day for you? Because it seems like you guys are struggling. What's the staffing like on the floor? You know, and also for them to interact with the customers. And they also brought all the assistant managers to a seasonal range review at head office. So they would be very interested to know how product was performing regionally. You know, I think that's the one headache for so many merchandising teams is, yes, this might perform super well in London, but how's it going to perform in Newcastle or Sheffield, you know? So again, that centering the sales advisor's voice about what is working locally, I think really can help fashion retail businesses.
So you found that experience at office, but that was kind of unique in terms of the other brands relative to the other brands that you've worked for. Is that correct?
For sure. I mean, the norm, and I'm sure Jasmine agrees, is the drop will just land in store, the delivery will land, and there's been no communication. Oftentimes it will be a style we've seen before. 2-3 seasons it's been coming in. We know it won't sell. Jasmine and I will say to each other, that's going straight into sale. On the day that it arrives in store, it's going to be sat on the shelf for 3, 4, 5 months. We're like, that won't sell because it hasn't sold historically for 3 seasons. We've kept telling head office, but they haven't listened. I appreciate it's very hard because obviously there's a huge forecasting element to buying for stores and to buying for wholesale. But 3 seasons down the line, I think someone should
You'd have hoped you'd got it by that point.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it just seems crazy, doesn't it? That there is all of this insight and that you have no, you know, the standard practices from your experiences that you don't have the opportunity to share those insights and input back to those teams that actually are determining what product is going to make it out onto the shop floor. Do you have any, I'm curious, that product that was 3 seasons, could you describe it for us? Give us a little visual.
Well, good luck with the lawsuit, Tim. I think what we can say is for sure, like, you'll know what I'm talking about, but there'll be products where we're like, the strap on, say, a handbag just needs to be a bit longer. Like, it's not even a hard change, but like consistently that product will come back in different colors, but the strap will remain the same, and it will mean that people won't buy it. You know, things like that, simple things like the clasp on something people hate. Like, it's not even sometimes, it's sometimes tiny little fixtures, and we'll be just
or
like,
the
well,
zipper doesn't work very well, or something very basic.
Yeah, I think another key takeaway is obviously a lot of fashion brands also have wholesale clients. They're probably saying the same thing, but actually getting that information from wholesale clients is even harder. So you really need to make use of your in-house shop floor retail teams to deliver those messages. Because with a wholesale account, it's a guy in a shop who does not care about your
Yes.
product, and then it's going to the warehouse. And so often that information is just lost.
That's such a good point, that you really do need to make the most of it. I feel ultimately it's interesting. You'd mentioned, you may have, a director that spends one day on the shop floor. I know that we used to have to work Black Fridays. I used to work in buying and merchandising. And then we used to have one other opportunity where we would do almost like customer focus groups, and we would go to a customer's house and we would go through their wardrobe. But that's one instance, maybe once or twice a year. I feel like, relative to spending a sustained amount of time on the shop floor, whether that was even a week or 2 weeks, I feel like the value would be, exponentially greater. So tell me more about any other experiences or things that you think would be valuable for store staff to be able to input into those product teams that are making the decisions.
I feel strongly that the onus should not be on the shop floor staff. We have information that we are more than willing to share, but it's for the teams at head office to make that happen. I had a guest on the show the other week, and we were talking about the good old days of retail where we would stay back half an hour, tidy the shop floor, write a report, but kind of those days have gone. People that work in the shop floor now are very poorly paid, very stressed, struggling to make ends meet. They don't want to be writing a product report at the end of the day. Again, from experience, I think Jasmine and I certainly found, when you're asked to write a report, you've written it for the 10th, 20th time and nothing happens. So the motivation isn't there. It really is about recognizing the talent on the shop floor and making a concerted effort to bring these people into the conversation.
I totally agree with Tim. They'll ask you to write these reports. I'm telling you now, that report's written at lunchtime, and I'm just going to click send on whatever the time is that I'm leaving the shop, I'm not getting paid overtime. And also it's if you want to get that valuable information from the store staff, then make them feel valued, make them feel valuable, because they'll then inherently want to help the business because they'll feel a part of the business. But so often, I know we've felt, is you feel so distant from the real business of it, and you just feel like the dog's body's just churning out sales, that you're like, I guess there's a little bit of resentment that builds up there, especially when you're being paid like minimum wage in most retail jobs. And, they're expecting you to come in half an hour before your shift unpaid. There's stuff like that you're just like, why should I help you out when you come in head office staff and, there's clearly hierarchy here and you don't think that my job's as important. It's about making the whole team feel really valued. And it is, like we said, doing things like those staff coming in and working a day so you can have a day off on Black Friday, for example, or giving a staff a team lunch during their work hours, just as the head office would, to make them really feel a part of the team. When you miss out on those sort of luxuries and privileges from the wider business, you don't feel a part, you feel very segregated. And I think that's where the issue lies and why you get this sort of distance that starts to build further.
I completely agree. I think this is going to sound controversial, but I think product is secondary in any retail business. Culture and community must always come first, and it's the culture and community within the teams, with all the employees and with the customer. If you can build that community, so often Jasmine and I would be sending an email to a name that we can't put a face to. So again, it feels very passive, wooden. How is this benefiting anybody? If the teams came in and met us, and really brought us into the dialogue, made us feel that we had something of value to offer to the business, I think those lines of communication would open up.
Absolutely. I think even just, I heard you both speaking about, things like having coffee and tea, and even like peanut butter, I think you mentioned, those are crazy things you're expected to be in super early. And then you may have someone from head office who doesn't even announce themselves, doesn't even introduce themselves to you. Just basic things that, as you said, ultimately you're all there for the success of the business to drive it forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we called the episode I'm from head office, because that is literally that is literally the line I've been hearing for 25 years when someone appears on the shop floor. Jasmine said in the episode, we think it's a customer, we're giving them the hard sell, and then they're like, I'm from head office.
Yeah, I do.
We're like, well, that was a waste of time.
Wasted effort. Yeah, no. And I'm curious, you've obviously, I think you made such a good point there that it isn't, the onus shouldn't be on you. It should be on head office. Ultimately feedback is a gift. They should be coming to you and valuing your expertise. Have you seen any experiences of where technology has been introduced into that feedback gathering? Because I have heard of retailers experimenting or trying to pilot capturing retail store staff through technology, but curious if you have had those experiences.
I mean, we were lucky if we could get a working PDQ machine sometimes. So I'm not sure we have from where we work together. But I definitely think, Tim, probably you know more about it than me, that some of the larger retails, I assume, would want to try and implement in some larger scale feedback system.
Yeah, I mean, there's always an opportunity, a till system to write a report or something. But again, I'm old school. And I think there's a real danger if you load the sales team up with reports to write, there's a product issue, typing it into the till, you're dealing with web returns, and now that stores are staffing the shops tighter than ever, if you overload the staff with report writing and dealing with web returns, it will impact sales. Jasmine and I have seen that so many times. We're so harangued, so stressed that the focus is no longer on the customer. And I think retailers lose sight of the fact that if you work in a shop, you're meant to be dealing and interacting with the customers in that shop. That's the priority.
That is such an amazing point and something that I think has totally gone unlooked. And I personally hadn't even considered that. Yes, fantastic. You could have this incredible system where you're filling in all this amazing product feedback, but ultimately you're taking away from the customer experience. One topic in particular that I'm really interested to get your take on is their customer profile or their target customer. How brands and retailers, they're like, oh, our customer is, Kate and she's a yummy mummy. And actually it's, Deborah who's purchasing, and actually the disconnect between almost like the Instagram versus reality of the customer profile is something that I think is fascinating. Based on your experiences, why is there such a disconnect between head office and who is truly shopping that from that brand and retailer?
I think so often design teams kind of dream up who they think is their dream customer. And I think often, again, ego is heavily involved here. They're like, yeah, it's Kate Moss. It's someone holidaying on a yacht. It's dropping the kids off at private school. And in reality, the people coming onto the shop floor is your mum of three. She lives in Birmingham. She adores the brand. She is the most engaged customer you could wish for. And yet she's dismissed in the conversations around what kind of product would suit our customer profile. And these kind of clients are the engine room of the business, the bread and butter, and the most engaged. And I think often the clients with the most money, often the least engaged, that very passive shopper that will pop in and just pick something up. They don't really care where it's from, or they don't care about the brand story. So I think that we need to leave our egos at the door, and really drill down into all that data that, retailers increasingly rely on, and really look where the sales are coming from. Because often it's people that have saved for months and months and months, might only buy 2 products a year, but they are the most loyal customer. And, retail is all about client retention these days. So don't dismiss those people, and there are cool people that aren't in Vogue magazine.
To add to that, I think that's so true, Tim. Like, these actually are the coolest people because they're the people who are literally the backbone of the country. These are everyday people who are actually making things happen. And I think for retailers, it's not alienating them in campaigns. I think we see a lot of campaigns where they're like, oh, yes, it's this really lovely product. Look at this person holidaying 5 times a year. Well, that's not who's shopping for you. And you're going to end up alienating them. And I worked with a really lovely woman who used to work at Selfridges, and she implemented this sort of tracking system in which they found out that, the people who the shop floor customers were treating like royalty are the ones who come in, they were dropping thousands of pounds. They were like treating them, and they were doing that maybe once or twice a year. They were coming in, spending thousands of pounds. So the staff were like, wow, they're an amazing customer. And they started to neglect the customers who would come in once a month, maybe buy a smaller item, a pair of socks. And actually, when they started tracking the sales, it was the person who'd bought the pair of socks every month who was actually spending more money total at the store than the people that come in once a year and drop a load of cash and then go. Because those people that drop a load of cash have absolutely no loyalty. They'll jump on the next best thing when it comes along, for sure. So it's like really, really holding on to those little diamonds who are loyal and who really love the brand. Because even if it looks like their purchase is small, if you look at that over time, they're literally the building bricks of that company.
I completely agree with what Jasmine's saying. I think, with the profit warnings at Kering, at LVMH, Burberry, they have lost sight of the fact that for years, there have been clients who save and will buy something, come and buy a bag for £600. You can no longer buy a bag for £600. So you're neglecting all of these clients. There's a reason why the first Hermes store outside of London was in Manchester. There's a reason why the first Harvey Nichols store outside of London was in Leeds. Because there's an appetite for luxury product. But with the increases, the ridiculous increases in luxury brand price points, they are now neglecting, this normal customer who likes to dip in and out of luxury brands.
It's that kind of golden 2+ purchase that we know so many of our retail customers are desperate to get to. And I think one thing at Edited we are, I said this before, but it's not what makes you money, but it's who makes you money. And I think, again, it's coming back to that and really digging into, as you said, those customers that have much higher lifetime value, who are repeatedly shopping with you versus, that VIP who maybe comes and spends over a certain threshold once in a blue moon. One thing I did want to ask you was, obviously we've seen many retailers introduce a strategy of free returns in stores. So we know Zara themselves have done that. In your experiences, are you seeing that ultimately convert into repurchases or exchanges, or ultimately increasing that kind of average order value? Or, what is the reality of that for those working in stores?
Well, I mean, it depends sort of what, because we worked in a commission-based environment. And I think sadly, because we weren't trained properly like many other people, you'd accidentally put that return through on your own till code, and then you'd be like minus numbers. So that's first of all where that starts to go wrong, bearing in mind you didn't even sell them the thing anyway. So that's a first issue with that. And I also think just like what you see is people buy multiple products, try them, and then just come in, and it's actually just more admin for you. I don't personally see that it is some sort of repeat customer. I just think it's a way of people, not having to come to the store and have a personal interaction with a shop assistant who could have told them that item looked terrible on them anyway. And second, like the other part, which is just like, it's just the internet now. It's the same reason all these companies are collapsing. It's just the mass buying, trying things on at home and returning them, in which like, you can't keep up with these companies.
Totally. I mean, I worked with a wholesale company that was working with ASOS. On average, for every unit sold, it would be returned 6 times before it was kept by a customer.
Wow.
Yeah, I think fundamentally with in-store returns, it will always come back down to staffing levels. Jasmine and I met in a luxury retailer, and often there is an opportunity to turn around a web return in store into an alternative sale. But if you have very tight staffing, a really perfect example is my local Tesco. When they introduced click and collect, you saw the impact that had on team morale, customer irritation, and just levels of efficiency within the store. They were just overwhelmed by dealing with click and collect products from different retailers, not even from Tesco. Like, of what benefit really in the long term is that to Tesco when they're making billions of pounds worth of profit, are not committed to increasing staffing levels, but seem hell-bent on increasing the amount of work that the shop floor staff need to be doing on a daily basis? It doesn't benefit anybody.
Just to add is that something I always think that I wouldn't have realised if I hadn't worked in retail is the returns we're processing in store, which I think lots of people think it goes to some magical warehouse and that some other team is doing this, like some whole other team. No. Not only are we having to write reports, sell things on the shop floor and XYZ, we're also then having to process the returns. So like we would have to be inputting like order numbers, putting them through the system as a return whilst the customer's there. It's all adding to the job, really. It's not like you're just taking them and some external person's doing it all. You're also doing that on top.
Jasmine makes a really important point about the amount that we're consuming. And when Zara introduced the charge for returns, I think everyone at first, myself included, was like, ugh. But actually, we are purchasing too much online, too passively, buying multiple items to find an outfit for the weekend. I think we have to start thinking much more about what is the environmental impact of this, of everything being delivered to our house. And I think the introduction of a small charge for returns is not necessarily a bad thing. And free in-store returns, yes, makes sense. But I think it speaks to the broader issues about how much we're consuming.
No, you're totally right. It is shocking that it's become normal almost to just buy maybe 3 of one product because you don't know how it fits. And that's alongside other, products that you will potentially be purchasing. Maybe you might not even keep any of them. So, we've totally normalized that consumer behavior, which interestingly, I would never do if I went to store. So I'm curious, we've seen so many strategies from, retail brands to try and boost footfall and get customers back into the store. I'm curious to understand from your experiences, what have you seen drive footfall and actually improve ultimately profit within that store unit?
I mean, other than Tim being on there, because that always improves footfall. I think, to be honest, if I'm really dead honest about it, it is that experience. It's the laugh we're having now. It's things like that. It's that banter with customers. That's why they come back, because they can't get that through a computer screen. And I think retailers really need to focus on improving that experience. And actually, when head office staff are going into stores themselves outside of work, considering how would this make me feel better? How would I enjoy this further? What would make me want to repeat purchase here? And often that's the whole part of it, If I wouldn't be buying 3 dresses, like you said, if I was in store to try on the sizes, I'd be there speaking to someone, having a laugh, but also creating space in retail where the experience shifts, where, you can be that kind of what I call a silent shopper who doesn't really want to interact with staff too much, but still is able to enjoy that experience and have some sort of connection there. But equally, what people like us who are super chatty, it is activations. I know that's like a bit of a buzzword, like activations and doing unique things and giving people a reason to go to the store, whether that's collabs. But it is about the energy. It really is about the energy that comes from the staff. And it's about doing exciting things and having exciting movement throughout the store. If you're in a store where the VM has stayed the same for like 6 months and, the products still the same, and yourself, you're not going to want to go into that store. You're going to you want to go in with purpose, because you've got to give people a reason to leave their house. And that needs to be greater now than ever before.
I completely agree with Jasmine. I think that there are fantastic activations that really do work. But again, it's getting back down to the fundamentals. Is your store offering exceptional customer service? Are you employing exceptional sales members of staff on the floor? Does the shop look dynamic? Is it offering product that people want within the locale in which the store is positioned? Those are the compelling reasons why a customer will step into the shop. It's not an activation. If you can really focus on those elements, I believe that you can still have a very successful retail store. The activations that I've seen that work the best, again, like I said earlier, are where the product is secondary. They're speaking about something which is of interest. Is it an environmental campaign? Is it something that is entertaining for kids in the half-term holiday? And, the knock-on effect is mum's going to buy a handbag while she's there. Those are great. So it's bringing in the family. It's creating a conversation around an important issue, but it's not force-feeding people product. I think those are the best kind of activations. I remember the Burberry one that they kind of did an activation in a Greasy Spoon cafe. And it kind of backfired. It just felt very much like they were appropriating working class culture. And I think so often these activations are dreamt up in the boardroom, but when they're put into reality, you're like, oh God, that doesn't look good. That was a misstep. And again, it's about speaking to the store staff thinking, do you think this is a good idea? Will this land?
I was going to ask you about total failures, but I feel like you've just nailed it with the Burberry example. But I feel like people like Gymshark, obviously bringing people there to engage in, whether that's run clubs or, not that I'm ever attending any of those myself, but it feels like it's a compelling experience that people want to actually engage in. And the product is secondary, as you said. And I think the other thing that I would love to highlight is you talk about the importance of the people and having exceptional people working for these brands and retailers. And if you're not appreciating them, you're not going to retain those exceptional people.
Yeah, the only way you'll get exceptional staff is if you pay them fairly and treat them well. Mm-hmm. It's so simple.
I think that they make it or break it, to be honest with you. You can put all the amount of strategy, conceptualizing into your ideas and, put as much money as you want. But at the end of the day, if the staff are miserable who are doing it, no one's going to want to come and experience your store.
Yeah, no activation is going to go well if the store staff are miserable and treated terribly. I can promise you that. If you're going to do a store activation, it's all about hype and energy. So that's, like Jasmine's saying, that starts with the people on the shop floor to build that. It's, it's bringing in a strategy landing on the shop floor with a miserable, demotivated workforce is not going to work.
No, 100% agree. Energy is palpable. And I feel like, you do feel that sometimes when you go into stores and there is an energy there and you're like, I don't want to spend more time browsing, this store in particular. But I guess one thing on this specific topic that I would love to round up with is you have spoken a lot about the death of the high street and the decline of brick and mortar. If you could summarize, maybe, both of you giving kind of two pieces of advice that you would love to share with head office, if they were listening today to really get shoppers back in store, what would that be? So I'll start with you, Jasmine.
So for me, like we said, it's all about staff. You need to really nail down what your culture is, what you're about, what your values are, and how you want that to translate into the staff. And I think when you do that, you also need to take into account their lives. And we're seeing that across the workforce, in any role. People want flexibility. They want to be able to have their holiday off. They want, these are all things that push people away from retail. They want to, occasionally have a bank holiday off. There are some small things, a weekend off once a month or twice a month. These are things that we've definitely experienced that you don't have, that you're not going to retain that beautiful wealth of staff. And the longer they stay, the more of a family it becomes, and more of a well-oiled machine it becomes. And I think that's really key with the high street. And we've noticed is the turnover of staff's just crazy. And no one cares about the store they're in, to be honest, because they know that next week they could be in another store. They could just leave their job and go and keep moving. And that really does create a different experience. And I'm of the thought that I don't think bricks and mortar are dead. I really don't. I think there's lots of people making it work in many different ways. And so I think people should hold on to that hope. I think if it needs to be considered, like you said, with Gymshark as an example, and lots of these people who are just having flagship stores, is truthfully, I do believe people will travel to shop. If there's a store someone wants to go to, and I've done it when I was younger, you'll go and you'll find it in that city, right? Wherever I've been on holiday, if there's something cool. But I think these retailers need to consider what the product is they're selling, because I think my generation, the Gen Z, shout out to us. But I definitely think that we're being sold to on so many different angles, through TikTok, through ads on our screen, all of this stuff, that it's bombarding. And often we'll go into these stores already knowing what we want to buy because we've watched 15 TikTok videos of someone trying that product, or styling it a certain way. And so we kind of need to be able to get that same level of engagement in a store, because we're getting it through our phones. And I think that's where technology will come in, these sorts of spaces that are quite immersive, that will really engage other generations to go and shop, because no longer are the traditional stores that stimulating. If I can watch someone try on, I listened to your Samba episode, like different colors Sambas, like then I'll know, but by the time I've got to the store, which color I'm getting. Whereas actually it doesn't give the sales staff a real chance to speak to me and explain to me the product and let me have that experience. I'm just becoming sort of this flock consumer group of people.
I think it's interesting when you talk about the different Gen Zs versus millennials and catering to their needs, and also, integrating technology with the store experience. And as you said, it kind of then just falls very flat when you walk into store relative to everything else that you've maybe experienced online or digitally.
I think it needs to be unique. For sure, why are charity shops so big? Why are people shopping in charity shops? Because they're coming out with something that no one else they know will have. And I think you need to create that experience in the stores as well. There needs to be something that you come away with thinking, going, wasn't that wonderful?
Again, another amazing point. Getting product that you wouldn't necessarily find anywhere else.
I think for me, and as I've said before, it's about localization. Really focusing, drilling down on what will work in your regional stores. I think making the product mix a compelling offering regionally is the most important thing that a multi-store retailer can do. And second to that, I think community. I'm from Darlington in the Northeast, a northern town. The high street used to be thriving. Now it really, really struggles. Marks and Spencer's pulled out of Darlington, a real anchor store that Darlington needed. And with that gone, the high street is just decimated. And there is no reason why that store couldn't have continued. Everybody shops at Marks and Spencer's. They just weren't offering a compelling localized offering of product, and B, actually weren't committed. I think these companies are now lacking in a sense of moral compass. Their presence on the high street in these regional towns and cities is so important. I think if a regional store isn't working, these brands need to commit to making it work. It isn't always about the bottom line. It's about communities, it's about jobs, and it's about protecting and saving our high streets. I think we need to move beyond the laziness and really double down about making sure that regional offerings are compelling and they're uplifting and maintaining community.
I mean, I'm from the Isle of Wight, so I also have the exact same experience where our high street has been decimated. And if Marks and Spencer's was to ever leave, I mean, there wouldn't be anything left, and ultimately there is nowhere else to go shopping. So it's not like they're competing from the next door town. But one thing I did want to ask on the follow up to the localized product offering, especially for Marks and Spencer's, what do you think they could have done better? What types of products did you feel weren't being satisfied, maybe locally?
I think I've got a really good example, actually. I was in Naples this weekend for my mum's 70th, and we went into the Zara store there. And she was like, how is all the product so amazing? Like, this is completely different product to what I get. She lives in York, in North Yorkshire. She was like, there is nothing in that store that I would buy. And I think so often brands dismiss people regionally and in the North, thinking, oh, we won't give them the top line product. We won't give them the cool collabs or the product that we've done on shorter runs, which are amazing interpretations of runway pieces, because they're not going to buy it. And I think there's this dismissal of people outside of London that, we have no taste. So often you go into regional high street shops and you're like, what is this tat they're selling? And then you go onto Oxford Street and you're like, oh, it's all here. That's why.
Yes. No, it's so true. It's like they just get the basic core lines. There's not color, there's not excitement, there's not interest, which, as you said, gets people back into stores and wanting to purchase ultimately. Amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. Obviously, it's been such a pleasure having you on. I feel like you've offered such an incredible insight that we've never had on the podcast before. So really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting us. It was so much fun.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Inside Retail with me, Grace Hill. For more insights, head to our resources section on edited.com and follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode.